Hello, everyone. Today is November 14th, 4:30 p.m. I'm Max Johnstone, and this is the Sylvania Development Committee meeting. I believe this is most we've had in quite some time. I think the only people missing are the Colonel and Patty, but we have enough for a quorum. Before we go forward, are there any adjustments to the agenda?
Just a suggestion.
Hmm.
I'm not voting on this, but I do think we need to think about electing a chairperson for this committee. We've been without one for a while. And it would be nice to have a more formal setup.
Okay.
I think we're asking a lot of you Max to carry the ball on this.
Is that something you want to try and address tonight for getting some officers selected, or?
Do we have anyone who's willing and able? Good question.
Worthy of discussion, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did it for several years early on, and it's, it's not a huge amount of time. I don't at the moment have it. I've got too many projects underway, but
Probably less now than it was.
yeah,
I
we
would
were
think.
starting from ground zero, just finding out what happened there, but just requires somebody is able to do it every month and stay on top of it. I agree, Matt shouldn't be doing it, but
I would be happy to do it. That's half the battle right there. I'm retired. How much does it pay? A lot of goodwill. I'll double that salary.
All right. So do we want to just vote on off? We want to just vote?
Make a motion? I'll make a motion.
is there anyone else who's interested?
Officially add it into the order of business, and then
Right.
we'll reach it when it seems appropriate.
All right. Yep. We'll talk about it after the election. So here after election. Okay. So citizens' comments. Seeing none. Minutes deferred to next meeting, just in the sake of time. Old business. So first I want to talk about the trails. This was something that's been on the back burner for a while. I did walk out with Morgan from Midcoast Conservancy just to look at the trail system and potential trail system and to get an idea of where they are in relation to the boundary lines. So the two orange highlighted lines you see are all the town-owned property, and I'm sorry that this wasn't in color. For some reason, this wouldn't print in color for me. And then the yellow is simply just the path we walked. I don't know if anyone has any comments or questions. It's as we all know it. There's some stream areas. It's not like you can walk all the way along. There's going to be some little peninsulas essentially, but the only big area that Morgan thought was an issue for this loop was where it says bushwhack needed. She saw some invasive species, but we can go around that for now, and it just requires a little more activity on that. But other than that, it's a trail that's essentially already ready. Just needs someone to walk through it and mark it.
Yeah, deal with the length was.
It's probably on my phone, but this was like maybe a good 30-minute walk. And this was us just rushing, not really taking in the scenery. It's just us trying to plow through quickly.
How did Morgan suggest that invasive species would inhibit the trail?
So other than that one, well, for that one bushwhack, it's just we'd have to go around it instead. Other than
Cut through the invasive.
rather than cutting through the invasive right now.
You know what species?
I don't. That's something where I'd have to just She said it, I just didn't have a notepad on me to write it down.
Just a budding. Robin and I have so much autumn olive, which is invasive, quite pretty.
Mm.
It's everywhere. We don't have as any Japanese knotweed anywhere. So that's good news for from our standpoint. But I bet on this property, there's a bunch of autumn olive, which isn't particularly aggressive compared to some other things.
Not up here. You're
Very
right.
hard to get rid of though.
Yeah, you're right.
And
Would you like some knotweed?
then the last item for the invasive is close to where it says boundary. That's roughly where the drop is, where the concrete ends, and then it plummets down back into the
Right.
vegetation. There were some suggestions of just having like some stairs or a ramp going down there to go through there, but we're dealing with a lot more invasives. The way Morgan described it, just getting this trail established is phase one, very simple, easy type of stuff. That invasive species would be its own phase two, essentially, because of how much work may have to be done to get rid of it. That was at least her 2 cents on it. Seth, I saw your hand up a while ago.
I'm just a little curious, South Hall resident, very interested in this property. Having walked this a number of times, I don't know if any of the rest of you have walked this, but if you go slightly 1230 from the bushwhack area to the impingement of the boundary line on the watershed, it's a very bold, interesting shore, quite nice, and it looks back at the village. It's the only place you can see the village. You can't see the village anywhere on this path. It's sort of a unique look up toward the Narrows. And maybe for future work, I would strongly encourage us to think about that as a particularly nice section of Old Shore.
Bob, you had your hand up.
Yeah, not only I think we want to talk ultimately about getting rid of invasives, but putting in natives, actually planting them in location, maybe doing an inventory of what's in there and marking out where the invasives are, and then seeing how we can mitigate that and possibly plant some native species to make it a bit more interesting. Is that a bad idea? Biologist on our team.
Just in terms of money and time, I feel like nature generally takes its course and you'll get native species in there potentially if you get rid of the invasives. But you might, I mean, the only reason to do that is to keep the invasives from establishing as quickly. It might be worth doing something like that. So yeah, I wouldn't rule it out, but it's often easier just to take them out and let the normal grow. If it hasn't changed the soil, a lot of invasives actually change the soil chemistry, so other things can't grow very well. So we can see.
Yep, Bob, I'm the chair of the Sheepscot Knotweed Invasive Species Project for the Midcoast Conservancy. Been at it for a couple of years. And after 20 years doing this work in Delaware, I can tell you that it's spot on. You want to prevent the spread, prioritize how much effort you want to put in. And it can be a lot of effort.
And I'm guessing there's way more than just that. There's probably bush honeysuckles, there might be barberry. I'm willing to take a look. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of other things. So first step, do that. And then,
Multiflora roses.
oh yeah, that's the one I'm hoping is not there. That's the worst of all.
I just discovered some more on my property
Yeah.
today.
That one would take time to get through.
You know, in year one, which is 2023 of actual intervention with the property, we might establish as a goal to survey and clearly delineate all the patches and by species and threat level,
Mhm.
and then create a plan.
Sounds good.
Are there any other questions for this topic?
Just one quick question. So you started out probably at this pin, but is the thought that, I mean, how would people access the beginning of the trail? What are you thinking there? Or is that not determined yet?
That's not really determined yet. The only reason that I started at that pin was just because when doing the site visits and just having some visibility for the people who were with me those days, I would just be at that parking lot at the bottom right corner just because it was so visible. And then I'd show them the boundary, show them the invasive species at that drop, and then we would show the rest of the way. I don't have any definitive starting point just yet.
I want to throw out there that I talked to Jan about this drone.
Mhm.
Use potentially of checking out the site, and I had already done some of it, so there are some other images out there of this.
Invasives, this is the perfect time, or we're just passing it because all the leaves tend to turn the same color. And they jump out at you, but so we'll be missing that. It'd be a lot easier to identify. I mean, October is like the ideal month in early November. So it may be hard to see all of them next year till the season, but we can start.
Bob?
If we're getting Midcoast involved, do we want to think at some point about formalizing a relationship with Midcoast? I have no idea what form that might take. I know that they work with us on Ferry Hill,
Oreo.
Quarry Hill. I get them mixed up. And I'm not suggesting we be leasing land to them or anything like that, but I do know they're interested in the trail, and they might have some resources or access to resources that they can help us get access to. Just a thought.
Did you talk about how? we
More of a
might work-
partnership.
Well, just how we would work with them or next steps with them or.
There wasn't too much there because Morgan had to quickly do the trail with me and then leave. And then I think she's been busy for the last few weeks. So, and the other part was with the survey, there was this idea that maybe people don't want trails down there. So we wanted to wait until the election results. But I think in terms of moving forward, that's something that I do want to talk to Pete about quite a bit about this one, and just projects in Waldeboro in general. Because this is, I mean, the trail system alone here is quite a big project that I think a lot of people would like, especially with it going right next to the water. Any other questions on this or?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It was just the mechanics of all this, you know, I've been pushing to get
Mhm.
the trail work moving. Can we get flagging put up so that I could get down with it's a little late in the year to be using a weed whacker and a chainsaw. It's kind of cold out there. But to get this path
Mhm.
flagged so that we can, you know, put hash marks on the trees and clear, I mean, that bushwhack needed, that's the gospel. I walked through it and probably still have some scrapes on my legs from 6 months ago. But I'm willing to do it, but it just needs to be marked temporarily, you know, in
You mean this trail that I have as
well,
shown?
whatever trail we set, we agree on, as Seth indicated a slight change. Whatever trail we agree on, let's get some yellow flagging on the trees so that we can clear it and have a circuit trail. I mean, it's not a big job even for 1 or 2 people.
I was gonna say, if the Conservation Commission usually has all the materials, I can talk with them and we'll prat about just getting some of the materials, and even I could probably just do it because I already have the maps.
If there's enthusiasm for delineating a trail, and we want to pull together in a day, an event, naturally, I'd be happy to volunteer. And I think a lot of other people would. And I wonder, parenthetically, did we reach out to Charlie Witherell, the gentleman who runs Midcoast Conservancy's, formerly in VLT's trail work in the watershed area?
I think I did a while ago, and then after the last meeting, Janet got me in contact with Pete, so I just focused working on that.
He's the
Sure.
one who heads their trail maintenance crew for this whole area
Right.
and is a pro. Be
Yeah.
great to work with you probably. I do feel like we need to, I mean, I think it doesn't hurt to figure out where this goes, but we also have to have a plan on who's actually going to maintain it. Is it going to be the Conservation Commission? Is it going to be Mid-Coast Conservancy? I mean, I feel like we have to get a couple questions. That doesn't mean we can't start, but we can't just put it in and then who's responsible for it is the question. So I just feel like we have to ask that, you know, is the Conservation Commission willing, or maybe Charlie Witherell and you, or what local volunteers will take it on.
Yeah, Seth?
I would second the thought of doing it sooner than later, having snowshoed most of this a couple of times over the last 3 or 4 years for complicated reasons. It's very different in the winter, and the access is much easier, generally speaking, particularly on snowshoes or cross-country skis. There's no reason to give up a year when we just about have snow here. Just need yellow tapes. People start and learn a lot about the property over this coming winter and next spring season.
Yeah.
Really invaluable. Why give it up for them?
Where are we in terms of uses? I mean, I think it'd be smart to get out ahead of this municipal property that can be used by anyone. Like, where do we stand on hunting, traffic, fishing, all of those sorts of things? I know those are very sort of hot button issues, but they're bound to come up, and the land is just teeming with deer and all sorts of other things. So I'm not making any statement. I think there's plenty of other places to hunt personally, but those questions are going to come up, and they're good questions that people get to ask. And we're asking them how it wants to be, asking people how, we would like it to be used, how they would like it to be used. And if there was an ability to even write something in there, we might have heard a number of things like the hunting, fishing, I mean, the stripers are mad down there in the Potomac when they're chasing bait in the spring and fall.
I want to know that.
Yeah. And, just anyway, I'm just wondering where we stand on that, and whether these things have come up, or if people have asked.
I haven't had anyone asking about hunting or fishing down there, but I think a lot of people didn't realize that there was water access down there too. And this was going to be saved for the survey, but when I was getting calls about people asking about this, they would say, well, how much water frontage is down there? And I'd say it's about 2,000 feet. And that blew a lot of people's minds.
It's a little tough to get to the channel down there, but it's
Yeah.
doable.
Well, I do think what uses are allowed is kind of key in terms of
Yeah.
what the
Mhm.
trail looks like. I mean, I'm assuming this is just pedestrian access, especially if we go by the survey of low impact.
Right.
If you were to allow bike, I don't think it's big enough for bikes personally, but say if you did, you'd have to harden the trail. So I think that should be pretty clear. And are we saying just foot access or not, and be really clear at the outset of what makes sense.
That's
on
where
this
I was
particular-
coming from.
Yeah, that's where I'm coming from
And
too.
the mountain
yeah.
biking crowd will appear despite the length. They will want access.
But it's soft ground, so it's just not appropriate. So just being clear at the outset, it's a walking trail.
And dogs on leashes, are they not? These are all really common problems on land
That's
trust.
another good
public lands.
question.
Just like it's a real problem. It's a liability issue.
What are for the town forest, what do we permit, not permit, exclude explicitly, or allow by implication?
The town forest? I believe there should be something in the back that outlines all this, but I believe everything is allowed except like hunting, because it's the assumption that people are just walking on the trails.
However, you walk it, there's a deer blind in there.
And
There is
it
already.
gets so little use. I think,
Yeah.
it gets compared to, this is likely to get a lot more use because it's right in town.
Mhm.
And for dog walking, the way the 80 Gray trails did for a while. And that is an issue. I know Hidden Valley had to tighten up and require dogs on leashes just because of the sheer numbers, and
Right.
dogs started biting people or each other. So it's another thing that's
Hmm.
easier to start tight and loosen up rather
Right.
than start loose and
State
tight.
of North now,
Right.
a bunch of stuff.
But yeah, I don't know if we want to work with the Conservation Commission on that. It seems like if they're going to, or find out first if they're willing to have this be under their jurisdiction. I mean, I'm not sure it makes sense for it to be under ours.
When you say their jurisdiction, do you mean the town donating it or putting it under a conservation easement?
I mean, just they are the ones who oversee its management.
Okay.
Is that really our job or ultimately? Or we say Midcoast or, I mean, I feel like somebody else should be overseeing the management besides the Sylvania task
Mhm.
force ultimately. Because we're not going to exist forever too. So
Right.
getting another group vested, I think is pretty important.
Right.
Whether it's the Town Conservation Commission, the way they do with the other trails in town, or Midcoast or in collaboration with Midcoast, probably ideally.
Seth?
And from my experience with Midcoast, which is not extensive, but considerable, they, I think, require an easement before they'll get involved for all kinds of reasons, for management reasons, for cost reasons. For have they come in conversation with this group yet?
Well, not at a meeting, but they have done a site visit with us.
Might that be a good place to have actual formal discussion on this?
Yeah, I don't think they would require an easement, actually.
Easements are different on municipal land.
Yeah,
Right.
No, unless we want to try, have them solely be responsible.
So,
I will stick my neck out and say it's probably not a great place to go hunting. And we ought to very, very quickly say no hunting of any kind or traffic.
It's too small.
It's
Yeah,
right
too
it's in the
small.
village,
Yeah,
close to houses, it's close to the river where people recreate. And it's just,
yeah.
No, totally agree.
you know, if you're right about that, we do have to set the rule. Making sure people understand it.
so the action items, I assume I have, one is to market for Mike. You want me to try and market as soon as possible so that,
Well, again, with the, as I said, the pleasant working conditions are not here for the next 4 months or so. So if it could get done before next spring, when it's not quite short sleeve weather, but a little warmer than mid-January.
So this is bug free
that's-
season. I see.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
Just wear some.
okay. So mark the trails but before next summer and then ask Conservancy about long-term future.
Well, I wonder if it's worth a meeting with whoever wanted to be there from here with Midcoast. I could call Charlie Witherell if you like, and the Conservation Commission. And just talk over what makes sense for managing it and who might oversee it. Just get, or the head of the conservation. It doesn't have to be the
Right.
full-blown group, but just have that conversation with all the potential players.
Okay.
Do that this winter, it's a good winter thing to do.
Would it be the Madonic Council you'd be focusing on as opposed to the head office in Edgecombe?
Probably more the Madonic
Yeah.
Council, really, it's
Yeah.
at least for the
Makes sense,
trail
they're
maintenance.
local.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Council. All right.
Clarify, there's not a determined trail yet. We're still talking about where we're gonna put the trails, correct?
Right. This was just me and Morgan just walking it.
Yeah.
Just showing what I've already walked. You can see a lot of these are where the ground testing are. So if the trail does go to those exact spots, they're already mowed, they're already maintained. We just would have to make sure there's some guard and protection on it. But
Always develop some spurs off of here. Like I love your idea of like the outlook upstream towards the village. And that would be gorgeous.
Yes, it could be a small loop.
Yep. Perhaps like even kiosks and things at some
Yep.
point
Yeah.
about the geologic history, the cultural history,
Yeah.
pre-European history.
That's
Birds.
very good.
just getting the one loop was the big focus, just to get down to the water. If people want to go beyond that, that's,
Oh, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
of course, you're talking way down the road.
Yeah.
I think that doesn't hurt to have a grand vision.
But as far as doing some preliminary marking, you're just talking about this part for now and potentially what Seth was talking.
yeah, I was gonna do this trail more than anything because it's already what I've tracked, and I'd have to get an exact spot for where the boundary line is so that I'm not crossing onto the neighbor's property.
Nice.
Just following up on those points, there's also some waterfront, very close to the waterfront, archaeological stuff in there from the late 1900s. Hand forged sea anchors driven into granite blocks, natural granite, not blocks, that they used to equip boats saying two of them in there. I just saw this weird ring coming up. There's a bunch of them in there. Might want to have somebody assessment of those things. I don't think they're particularly valuable. It's not like an Indian shell list or something, but it's historical. It'd be nice to document it.
So with all that, and since it's almost 5 o'clock, I think we really need to get to the survey results right now. As I said, I don't have that much time. All right. So we had the election last week. Good turnout, about 2,500 or so people were in attendance. I had the actual number, but I didn't bring it with me. And these were the results that I put together today. I wasn't here on Thursday, and this was just a rush for me to get it. So these are, I'll say, the unofficial results. And anyone who's watching can ask for a copy, and I'll gladly send it to them after the meeting. I think the survey's kind of, I'll go through what had the most support, what had the most against, if that's all right, just to start. So for Sylvania, Preserve for Low Impact Recreation had the highest amount of support with 1,447 people in support of it. Second highest was Outdoor Sports with 1,104, and then Gazebo / Open Structure with 1,015. And then against, the highest was leased solar to a third party. I'm sorry. Leasing for storage was the highest one with 1,395. Second highest was leasing out to a third party solar for 1,242. Sorry about this. And then third highest was leasing out for the electricity storage at 1,186. And then on the Haas's house, on the backside of the paper, the highest in favor was selling the Haas's house, but not the rest of the property with 791 people supporting it. Second highest was selling the entire lot with 684 people supporting it. And the third highest was leasing the house out to a nonprofit with 584. And then the highest against was leasing the whole lot out to a commercial use for 1,168. Second highest was leasing only the house for commercial with 1,005. And then the third highest was selling the entire lot with 920. Although the Haas's house has a lot of people saying they are neither for nor against a lot of these items. So it's kind of hard to specifically pin down what to do on the Haas's house.
Yeah, demolish it would be number 2 if you add the orange and the blue,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which I think is
Isn't that
interesting.
fascinating?
Yeah.
And the tarp is off the roof as of today.
it's been
Finally.
Yeah, well, it's been
No, you
floating around.
completely?
Really good.
Completely?
No, it
Well,
wasn't.
it's-
On my way here, it was still hanging out
It's
the side.
Oh, it's been there since,
Just at least
it's
just
been
take
there
it down.
since 4 weeks after I put it up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, honestly, the guys did a great job, but in parenthetically, John Daigle hasn't been able to get the high lift, the boom truck back.
Mm.
And that's the reason he hasn't been able to do this, restore the tarp.
All right. All right. So
So this is a little confusing.
It
I mean,
is, yes. It is
Well,
confusing.
selling the house, if you want to just go by the number of votes,
I think you have to take into account the number against the idea as well.
yeah,
So we come up with a final number. Because selling a lot, 700 people support it, but 900 people are against it. So even though it's one of the highest 4,
well, selling the lot doesn't seem to add up, but selling the house had the least number of people against it, which is kind of interesting.
Right, selling the lot, just for clarification, selling the lot was the whole 8 or 9 acre piece.
10 acre, yeah.
Right, the whole piece.
The whole piece all the way down to the water.
Right. Okay, yeah. Apples and oranges there.
It's only a lot including the house.
And the house, yes.
all the way down to the water. All the open space goes with the house. That's what
But
we
ju-
think they're against.
but just selling the house would require us just to split off the lot to meet the minimum lot size requirements, and also so that none of the house would be in that plume area that DEP's pointed out. And that's what selling the house would have meant.
What's minimum lot size in that?
Well, it's currently zoned industrial, so I believe it's, I think it's 150,000 square or 2 acres. I'd have to confirm that. I think it's 2 acres
I thought it was 2 acres.
Yeah.
It's 90,000 square feet, I think,
or 80,000 square feet, I
or
think.
maybe 80,000.
Yeah.
It's only an acre wide at the front, 208 feet, so that would be 2 acres deep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
Makes
it's
sense.
cool house.
Makes sense. I mean, I was hoping for some really overwhelming support for one thing. That we could.
Never happens that way.
It never happens that way.
I should know
Some of
that.
these titles are sort of generic. I mean, if you had said instead of a gazebo or the lot for the commercial, if you put specifics to that, you'd probably get a stronger response.
Right.
There's self-storage units in there versus something else, a dog park. Get more specific response.
It's part of why preserve for low impact recreation was so overwhelming. That's so clear what that means,
Right.
which is great. It's great to see people loving that.
Well, I feel like if you could again consider the support in the mid, they're about 2/3 for 2 of the options, which to me is enough of a, I don't think we'd have to worry about a backlash, if that's what we're worried about, of doing those 2 options of demolishing and selling.
Mm.
Some of the other ones are a little trickier.
Right.
And the selling the house, we can say that most people were in favor of that. If you just do the math.
So Matt, is it the intention that based on the survey, this committee is responsible, and I think it should be, for
Mhm.
coming up with specific recommendations going forward.
Yeah, so there does need to be a specific recommendation to go to the select board from this committee. This was just a survey we wanted to have out just to get the pulse of the town, just to be sure that we wouldn't be spending so much time on one specific thing, only for people to then say, no, we don't want it. We don't want that at all. Like, for example, if we had done storage, let's just say that, I think a lot of people would be upset by the time we actually go before the voters and put so much time into saying we're going to sell it to one of the storage unit places along Route 1.
You touched on the idea that it's the vision thing. And if the committee comes up with a coherent vision that addresses a lot of the pluses on this survey,
Mm.
you'll find probably a great deal of acceptance or not. But it is the vision that's important.
And Seth, I do see your hand up, but the one thing I wanted to quickly say on Bob's point, this was kind of going to be part 1. The second part was doing a more public forum afterwards, just to go over these results with the people and just make it very clear, maybe do something at 6 o'clock a bit next month or in January, just so people can get out of work and then come to the meeting as well to really see these results and also give their opinions on it as well, and maybe go into more specifics on what they were thinking when they were voting in November. So that's, oh, Seth, did you still have a question or?
Yes, I do. I would follow that up by observing that, as far as I know, I've seen nothing written or published or even discussed on the town website about the kinds of things you can and can't do on this property. Here's the whole question, which you guys are intimately aware because of the covenants and restrictions. You know, we really have 2 pieces of property here. The open land, the river, and then the severely the Hobbs's house is, of course, uninhabited. And nobody knew that. Been to. That's not. Covenants. might be really good to have a forum like that where people came in and really started to understand what the different areas of this property are. They're quite different, quite potential, useful in different ways. But I don't think anybody has a clue about that. They just use the subjects. Thank you. That's been problem figures. I would strongly encourage you.
Mike, did you have your hand up?
I did. Given the housing situation, well, countrywide, not just townwide, I would be very much in favor of selling it and having someone refurbish it and people live in it.
It can't be.
It can't be lived in.
Cannot be lived in.
Right.
Well, hold
No,
on. Well, let's
If it's outside the
let's
plume, can it be lived in?
let's calm down for just a moment here. So, yeah, for that one to happen, it would require someone to go to the DEP and have an amendment done to the covenant. That was what was said by Max Lewick a few months ago before we were doing this. That I want to just clarify
It's
that.
fixable.
It's
It
fixable,
is fixable and habitable with DEP concurrence.
correct.
And the signals we're getting from
And-
DEP are that they will look at it and they don't have a closed mind about it.
I can tell
As
you.
long as we carefully define the parameters and make sure that it continues on town water, that we don't cut off too much, that the plume isn't. And they're gonna go through they're gonna make us jump through all that stuff.
Hoops.
And it will be a buyer beware situation if with DEP concurrence, we decide to sell it.
So I'm unclear. I thought residential was never an option.
So-
Potentially commercial, but it could be.
So it's in the covenant right now that it can't be used for residential. It would have to be amended, but we would have to prove that it's on sewer and water and it's not going to cause hazardous issues. So there have to be an environmental survey on it. And now, Seth,
I would just second exactly what Bob said. I actually dealt with DEP and asked exactly those questions. And they gave me exactly the answer Bob gave me. And they warned that modifying a covenant is very difficult, tends to be very expensive, but it's not prohibited and it's not at all impossible that you couldn't salvage that house. This was 2 years ago.
zoning would have to go before the planning board first to make a recommendation and then go to a town warrant. So it's possible. It just won't be something that can be done in a month. It takes a little bit of time. But I mean, if it's going to be sold anyways, it would have to go to the town for a vote for that anyways. So.
Like we don't really have an option but to try this.
Yeah.
I do think like you said, maybe January. I don't know if we want to do it with the holidays before that, but open it to the public. But do we want to have a sort of potential vision out there for them to respond to, or just say, we gave you this, are you okay with it? I mean, what's our purpose of, I sort of almost would like us to agree on a general plan
Mhm.
based on this and just see how, discuss it. That would be my bias.
Yeah, I feel strongly that if we don't have a vision,
Mhm.
there'll be no consensus that will be derived from a public forum. So you need to have something to shoot at, something to support, something to oppose. And then it gets, then through consensus, it changes. But you have to have a starting point. And I think it's very useful if we decide where we stand on each of these questions ourselves and then have some sort of consensus about it. On the subject of timing, Max will know, and actually Bob will know, that I amended through a public partnership agreement with the EPA for the Wildcat landfill, which is the 10th of all the Superfund sites resolved in American history under CERCLA. I had to amend that agreement in order to allow public access and recreation. And we did it successfully, and it took the better part of a year. So I don't know if this process of selling the house with the loose end of it not being habitable presently, without having done that diligence first, is the right way to go or not the right way to go. I just don't know. But we might take a year to resolve that.
I thought it would take a lot longer than that. I'm
Okay.
just glad to
And
hear
will
you're
the
only a
house
year.
last? This is the question. How much time do we have?
Yeah.
And so you have to hire an environmental consultant to do an assessment and submit it to the interrogation of, I guess in this case, your State Department.
Mhm.
And then there's a back and forth about the content of it. So let's just assume a year anyway. Would we be able to sell the property or dispose of it or have any activity there of any consequence before, 2024? That's the way it seems to me right now.
We'd also have to have funds to demolish, whatever happens is going to take money.
Mhm.
I like your idea of deliberating. Maybe that can be our next meeting, coming up with what we all agree on.
Like a basic outline for the plan
And then invite the public at the next meeting.
in January.
Community with the ideas.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just survey fatigue. You
Mhm.
don't want to be asked much more about what they think.
And we
it
could
should
have a
be.
press
Just tell
release
them
in
what
the
we think it should be.
Yes.
And we could put a press release out outlining what we're doing specifically so they can come educated.
It'd also be nice if whatever vision we have could actually be made visual. I think it'd be a lot easier for people to respond to it.
Yes, graphics.
Just very quickly, Patty, were you going to ask a question a while ago?
I was just gonna say if we could clarify this data, especially before it goes before any kind of public meeting, because this is kind of be clear to some people. And I think either graphics or some other way to maybe show, put it in more of a
Put it in order.
format where it shows, okay, these were the heavy hitters. We definitely don't want this. We like this. And then there's a bunch of people in the middle, especially with the house stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like, we're not sure, but we kind of like this idea. And I'm not sure. Looking at all of that, that selling it is the highest number. It's close to
Good point.
demolishing.
Right.
Okay. And
You
then,
know what I mean?
Mike, you had a question first, and then Seth.
I'm hearing sort of broad agreement in all of this, that we want to sell the property and have it developed into a habitable place. That's what we would be presenting to these folks in any sort of forum, and would be looking to build community support for the idea. I think if the community got behind it, environmental consultants often have adversarial relationships with communities. They wouldn't necessarily be that in this case, but telling the public what we want to do with it and why it's such a valuable piece of property. It provides housing. It's a historical house. One of the oldest families in Waldoboro used to live there. And it will add to the tax base of the town. Here are the pluses.
Right.
It's almost like we need a position paper on it, that we need the
Well, I think
committee
that's
to
what,
develop.
I think that's what Janet was
Position.
sort of suggesting for next month.
I don't think it needs to be complicated, but yeah, the pros and cons too.
Just
and the
more of a
cons
bullet point list of what,
Yeah, just
yeah.
a list of what you just
Yeah,
said, basically.
okay.
I
But I'm
think
thinking, oh, go
for me, having a clearer sense of what DEP would actually be asking for before
Mhm.
I'm prepared to say that that's a vision that I buy would be really helpful. If it actually is so costly to get to the place where the house is habitable and sellable, then we might not feel like that's our best option.
I'm wondering if there is a way to find out what it would cost to do the environmental assessment and also what it would cost to demolish the house.
Right.
And both of those are going to cost money.
We issue an RFP.
Seth?
I just wanted to make the observation for your consideration. Maybe one of the first things you might think about is bifurcating this property. That the house's property really is not trail-wise down on the shore side. It's really a different sort of problem or challenge than the much larger 39 acres. So every decision to decide, for example, about the house's property. You have a full discussion about everything else you want to do on the figuratively speaking opposite side of the paper, and that's a very maybe more efficient way to approach the problem, particularly in terms of the January meeting, talking to people about it, sort of discuss it with them. dealt with the houses piece, and then everything else is two functionally different, somewhat different projects. I think administration and management of your discussions would be a whole lot easier. We'd be talking about TDP, cost implications, all this stuff. Simultaneously, let the public know that that's not habitable. It will take a year or two to figure that out. At some rough cost. Should the town do that? Should the town
Should we decide that it's too costly to get it ready for sale? It could be, and potentially it could be demolished and then included in the entire property with the trails, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't,
So I don't think we can look at it necessarily.
yeah, I agree. I don't
One or
think
the
we
other.
should
It could be included.
separate.
Well, and that might be part of it where with the results, there were some people talking about being fine just selling the house. Well, they might not, as Seth said earlier, people might not be aware of the condition of the house right now, and showing it as a whole map, showing where the house is, if it's demolished, then it's more open space that could be used for the activities people listed in Sylvania, as you said.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Can the house be raised? Is it something the volunteer fire department would love to get their hands on? Not that I'm suggesting that it should happen, but.
Speaking from my experience, they would love the chance to burn it down.
give them any building and they're fine with it.
That's what they did tomorrow. Their eyes lit up. Figuratively and literally.
Give them any building and they'll be fine with it.
520.
Yeah, I see it's 5:20. Are there any last minute things?
Perhaps one of the things we didn't think about,
Mhm.
I know I didn't, is that if there are essentially no environmental consulting costs
Mhm.
associated with the commercial side uses of the building, which to wit, 7 days a week from 9 to 5 it gets used, but it's not residential.
Mhm.
And we haven't been able to break that out really in the survey. But that's the kind of thing that gets exposed that could be developed between now and a public forum.
Okay.
Because it's another use of the building. It's adaptive, preserves the building. It also pulls out, it leaves the open space.
Mhm.
And it also eliminates the DEP quarrel, which is what it seems to kind of amount to. We should put our
Selling
minds to
it for
that.
something other than residential.
Yes, we should put our
And
minds. to
I
that.
think that's fine. All right. And the last final thing I'll say is that the capping study was also approved by the town, right, Bob? So the cap for where the Sylvania
good.
footprint was, that was approved. So we're gonna get,
Funding got
yes.
15.
So that's the last thing. I assume
Very good.
we'll do the officers next meeting first thing.